सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The incidents of the last several weeks which have made headlines suggest to us that a new operational area is now opening up in Jammu and Kashmir. It is not in the Kashmir Valley. Now, you can call it a new operational area depending on how old you are or how long you've been following this situation, or you can say an old operational area is reopening because this is the area that was really alive, say between 1996 and 2003, 2004, then it went quiet. Now it looks like the area is coming alight again. That is the general Rajouri Punch area. Now, where is Rajouri Punch? Look at this map. Now, this is not an authorized map. It's a publicly available CIA map that we have taken from the University of Texas website, from a paper published there. Now, this map is not to scale. This does not denote any country's boundaries or anybody's actual ground position. None of that. This tells you what is where. So you can see as you go northward from Jammu, Akhnur, that is where the international boundary ends and line of control begins. And you keep going north, you can see that the territory of Pakistan occupied Kashmir is not very wide, it's quite thin. On the east, that is this side, on the east of it is Indian territory or Indian controlled territory right now. Indian territory is also what's in Pakistan's occupation right now, what India calls Pakistan occupied Kashmir. But line of control, to the east of line of control is Rajouri or Punch. These big districts. Out of Punch, a couple of tehsils remained with Pakistan when ceasefire began on 1st of January 1949. So a couple of those tehsils remain in Pakistan. If you go further north from here, then you see the Haji Pir Bulge, right? You see a bulge like this, that is the Haji Pir Bulge. That was traditionally the route of the launching pad for Pakistani infiltrators coming into the Kashmir Valley, because north of Haji Pir Pass or abutting Haji Pir Pass is the Uri area. Then you are pretty much cross the Haji Pir Pass and you're coming into the Kashmir Valley. Rajouri and Punch, on the other hand, are a little bit distant, but what stands between these two districts and Kashmir Valley is the Pir Panjal range. Now, it's a formidable range, but it's not that large. It's not that wide, 50-60 kilometers. If you've been trained to trek, particularly in not such bad weather, you can take your time, you can trek, and you can get into the valley. So, between 1996, 2003, ISI, etc., or the handlers of infiltrators and terrorists from Pakistan would use this route. This route later dried up. I think in 2003, there was also a major operation carried out because there were lots of attacks in this area before that. So there was a major operation which was sometimes called Operation Hilkaka. Operation Hilkaka. Hilkaka is a feature, the highest feature in a forest called Surankot in Punch area, very thick forest called Surankot. It was also called Operation Satvinash in 2003. Since then, this area has been quiet. But see what's happened in this area lately. So I'll just give you a list very quickly, and this will also run on my screen. May 5, that is just the other day, 5 soldiers of 9 para special forces killed. It looks like they were walked into a trap. They were caught. They were ambushed. These are the finest of the troops that the Indian Armed Forces have. A big setback. So 5 soldiers of 9 para and their officer was injured, who is now recovering in a hospital. That is one. Number 2, 20th April. That is just 2 weeks before this. 20th April, 5 soldiers again of Rashtriya Rifles. They were killed in an ambush on an army truck which was carrying fruits and some other things for an iftar in the evening at a nearby village. It was well known that they were carrying this. But surprisingly, it was a solitary truck in an area which is quite prone to ambushes. But the fact is that for a long time, nothing had happened. So people begin to think that this is normalcy has returned. It's also an area which is not far from the line of control. It's just about 6 kilometers from the line of control. So these 5 soldiers were killed. So that was the other incident. Just 20th April, 5 soldiers killed. 5 soldiers killed of special forces, 9 para special forces on May 5. 5 soldiers of Rashtriya Rifles killed on 20th April. Before that, on 2nd of January this year, 2nd of January, 2 children were killed in an IED blast outside the house of one of the victims of the previous day's attack in Rajouri, right? So I'm just going chronologically. So on 2nd of January, there was a bomb blast that killed 2 children. So this is outside the house of one of the victims of the previous day's attacks that killed 6 civilians. Initially 4, then 2 more died. 6 civilians, all Hindus, again by terrorists in Rajouri. That was 1st of January 2023. That's how the new year began. Then go backwards still. If you go backwards still, then you come to 16 December 2022. So you've gone 2 weeks backwards from 1st of January 2023. 16 December 2022, 2 civilians were killed outside the army installations, the big army installations gates in Rajouri. Initially it was rumored that it was the army sentries who opened fire, but later it turned out they hadn't opened fire. It came from a terror attack. Then you want to go backwards, I can take you backwards because we are focusing on a region. This is at a time when Kashmir Valley has been relatively quiet, almost completely quiet. In October 2021, right? Now you may be going back almost 18 months, but it's significant because what happened then was significant. In October 2021, 9 soldiers were killed in the same general region, not far from the LOC, in the same general region, in 2 separate incidents, but connected incidents. And I will tell you why connected. So first of all, 5 soldiers, including a JCO, were killed in the Surankote forest. Surankote is a very thickly forested area in Poonch district, very thickly forested. And that's where, in the heyday of insurgency, that is between 1996 and 2003, terrorists coming in from Pakistan would hide for several days, and that's where they found caves. They started living in caves, and then they also started moving out of there. This became a kind of a safe hideout for them. And then because they were quite active in the valley, they could come to the valley. Now the valley is not available because valley is quite saturated with troops, and also the valley situation is very different right now from what it used to be. Further, the people who are coming in now from the Pakistani side, they don't speak Kashmiri. These are all Punjabi speaking. They are mostly people from Pakistan's Punjab. So it's very difficult for them to merge with the population in the valley. But they are now coming into this area, obviously with a purpose. You know that everybody knows, and the Pakistanis know for sure that India is going to hold G20 event in Kashmir Valley. So they want to also serve the reminder that that they don't believe that things are normal in Jammu and Kashmir right now. So that is why you see this relighting up of this sector. So 5 soldiers were killed in Surankote forest, and then just after that, another 4 soldiers, including a GCO, were killed in the Mendhar region. Now the reason I said these are 2 separate incidents but connected. That's because the terrorists who killed the 5 in Surankote forest are the same group, the same party or the same group that was then withdrawing to Pakistan. And on the way, they found another army unit, because obviously army was also in hunt for them. And they killed 4 more soldiers, including 1 JCO. This was 4 days after the first incident. Again, separate incidents, but connected. Now, look at the map once again. If you look at the map, you will understand the importance, the tactical and strategic importance of this region. In 1947-48, heavy fighting had taken place in this area because the Pakistanis really wanted control of the towns of Rajouri and Poonch. Rajouri, for quite some time, was under the control of the raiders. So the town changed hands a couple of times. Finally, the Indian army took the town, and the town has been with Indian army since then. Poonch itself was not captured by the Pakistani raiders or the Pakistani army, but there was a siege on Poonch. And that siege lasted almost exactly 1 year. And ultimately, the siege on Punch was lifted by the Indian Army. Indian Army broke the siege on Punch on 20th November 1948, right? 1st January 1949, as we told you earlier, was the ceasefire. And that's where the line of control came into being and has pretty much remained like that. Very little changed after 1971, because after 1971, both countries decided that any territory they had taken in the Kashmir region, they will retain. There will not be an exchange of any territory there. That's how Pakistanis kept the Cham salient, and that's how India kept all those heights in Kargil and quite a bit in Turtuk region as well. So 71 LOC changed a little bit, otherwise it hasn't changed. Of course, India meanwhile formalized its control of the Siachen Glacier. Now, if you look at these two districts, Rajouri and Punch, they are about 4,000 square kilometers, almost exactly 4,034 square kilometers. And if you see the line of control that they share with Pakistan or Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, that is 200 kilometers. So it's quite a large front, quite a long front. Again, if you look at the topography, India is on the higher ground in this entire region. The fighting in 1948 finally stopped on the ridge lines, which means India controlled the ridges. Pakistanis, on the other hand, were on lower ground. But remember, besides topography, there is also a demographic factor. The demographic factor is that people who live here on both sides are of the same ethnic and religious stock. So Punch district, for example, is more than 80% Muslim. More than 80% Muslim, about 15% or maybe a bit less than that Hindu, and maybe 3-4% Sikh. So just as population on this side in Punch is almost 80%, 85% Muslim, so it is on the other side. On the other side, it's almost entirely Muslim, but they speak the same language. They are from the same tribes as Gujars, Bakarwals, converted Rajputs. They are from the same ethnic stock. And there is a lot of family relationships on both sides. Again, if you come south towards Rajouri, see on the map, Rajouri population mix is a bit different, but still Muslims are in a large majority. It's 60% plus, Hindus are about 30%. There are some Sikhs there. But once again, people on the other side, the other side of line of control, are of the same ethnic and religious stock as people on this side. So there is a lot of commonality. The important thing is these people do not speak Kashmiri on either side. These people speak what we might call loosely a kind of Punjabi. In fact, if you speak Punjabi, you can get by in those areas. Because Mirpur is on the other side. These were the most heavily populated areas of Kashmir. In fact, even in 1947-48, these areas were as populated as the plains of Punjab. And it is refugees from these areas or migrants of these areas who today form the large Pakistani diaspora, say, in Britain. They come from areas abutting this part of line of control with Rajouri and Punch. That is to understand the topography and demographics of the area. So why are the terrorists now coming into this area? One, they are coming in to remind the world that they are not down and out, that they can still create problems. The second reason is, and I spoke with General H.S. Panag, who commanded the Indian Army in the same precise area because he was a Northern Army commander. So he knows this area like the back of his hand. In fact, he'll be writing his column this week about why we should not count out Pakistan when it comes to its ability to keep causing these troubles for us in Jammu and Kashmir. So read his column. So he tells me that under Rashtriya Rifles, in this area, 2 sectors were created that Rashtriya Rifles units were watching. One was the Rajouri sector, the other was called the uniform sector. He said the uniform sector has now been thinned out because several of those units, particularly the brigade that was deployed there, that has now been moved to Ladakh because that area needs watching. So the Chinese have forced that imbalance on the Indian troop disposition in this area. And that's what the Pakistanis are taking advantage of. And that's why more people are coming in. Now, once again, he also says that, look, these are small incidents. So these are very disturbing when they happen. That's because we are no longer used to seeing incidents in Jammu and Kashmir. But in the past, much bigger incidents were taking place. In fact, the incident I mentioned to you in October 2021, where 9 soldiers were killed in two separate incidents 4 days apart. That was the largest number of casualties since the Pulwama bus bombing, right, in 2019. So that tells you how violence or terrorism has declined in Jammu and Kashmir. And that's why what's happening right now is making such big headlines and is hurting us. So what's likely to happen now? Again, I quote General Panag because he's also studying the situation and giving us a sense of what might happen, is that once again the army will deploy more resources here. It's a lesson for us that for Pakistan, it's a very low-cost operation because you can send half a dozen people, cause a couple of incidents, it makes headlines, and maybe a large army then has to deploy a brigade plus or 2 brigades to clear out that area. And that is how you tire out the other army, you get them preoccupied. And that's how you also tell the world that you also exist, that you can also create trouble for India, that everything in Jammu and Kashmir is not as hunky-dory as government of India might claim it to be. The other important thing is that Pakistan has just gotten off the hook on FATF, that is Financial Action Task Force. So they think that at least for some time, they have the freedom of operation. But the moment pressure goes up, maybe this will stop again. Now, whether they're going to again infest this area with so many people from across the LAC, almost all Punjabis, with so many people that you might be back to a situation as we had between 1996 and 2003 when bands of terrorists were living in caves in Surankot forest and other areas that we don't know. It's going to be much tougher because the moment the army turns its attention to the fence in this area and starts manning it and watching it, this infiltration is going to be very, very, very tough. Of course, it will consume a lot of troops, a lot of manpower on the Indian side, but it will be tough. But do the Pakistanis want to know it? That is something we'll understand in the course of time. But the fact is that the strategic and tactical importance of Rajouri and Poonch, because they in a way lie this side of South Kashmir. Once you cross this area, it is quite possible to get into South Kashmir. And that was the area that in the past had so much violence, so much trouble, and so much militant activity. And this importance was not even lost on the British general, the last British commander of Pakistani army. You remember that when the fighting took place between 1947 and 48 over Kashmir, both India and Pakistan had British commanders. So India had Lieutenant General Roy Butcher and the Pakistanis have Lieutenant General Douglas Gracie. So there is a quote from Douglas Gracie from a paper that he wrote for Pakistan government then. He was then the Pakistani army chief. And I take it from Sudhir Bloeria's article from South Asian Terrorism Port. It's a long quote, but please pay attention to this. So he's writing this in 1948 and he says, that is Lieutenant General Douglas Gracie, then the British Chief of Pakistan Army, and I quote, "An easy victory of the Indian Army, particularly in the Muzaffarabad areas, is almost certain to arouse the anger of the tribesmen against Pakistan for its failure to render them more help, more assistance, and might as well arouse them to turn against Pakistan." And then he goes on to say, if Pakistan is not to face another 27,50,000 people uprooted from their homes. So that gives you an idea of the population that existed in this region then. So he says, if Pakistan is not to face another 27,50,000 people uprooted from their homes, if India is not to be allowed to sit on the doorsteps of Pakistan on the rear and on the flank at liberty to enter at will and pleasure, if civilian and military morale is not to be affected to a dangerous extent, and if subversive forces are not to be let loose in Pakistan itself, it is imperative that the Indian army is not allowed to advance beyond the general Uri, Poonch, Nowshera line. And that is where the line of control came into being in 1949, on January 1, 1949. And that is across which Pakistan is once again trying to make mischief. And by the way, I had mentioned Hajipir Bulge to you, that you see as you go further north, that's between Uri and Poonch, comes in like that. That is the area that Indian Army captured in 1965. You want to know more about it? It was called Operation Bakshi. Then read this book. You will find it in a library. You might even find it online. This is War Dispatches, Indo-Pak Conflict of 1965 by Lieutenant General Harbaksh Singh. He then commanded the Western Command. The Western Command then also used to look after all of Kashmir, the area which now Northern Command looks at.